We have a very exciting interview with Rabbi Commander Michael Goldman, and we can't wait to share it with all of you. But before that, the goal of these interviews aren't always to know exactly my opinion. I more want to know the people that we're interviewing and what we can learn from them. In this one in particular, I've had multiple requests to clarify my own opinion. So I'm going to do that here. I do agree with Rabbi Goldman that if the Jewish people are in a state of absolute emergency, like it was in 1948, that everyone should be called up to arms if we literally need every single body, because other than that, we're facing destruction otherwise. So man, woman, child, it wouldn't matter. If everyone needs to be on the front lines for a practical tachlis reason, so then we should do that. 2, if the army feels that it needs more people, but not literally every single soul, then my personal belief is that Chilonim should go first. Reason being is that there are 2 wars that are always being fought, or there's one war that's always being fought. That war is the war of Torah, to make the world an existentially better place, to make the universe an existentially better place, and we always need the Beis Midrash from that, and that's never going to change. Those in the Beis Midrash are fighting those wars every single day, and every single battle is really important. For those that aren't fighting those battles and fighting those wars, so then they should be on the front lines of the physical war that we might find ourselves. So that's why I think that people not learning should go first. And even if we were to compare someone who is learning for, let's say, an hour or 2 to someone who's not learning at all, the person learning an hour or 2 is helping fight that battle of the existential uplifting of the universe. So they should not be the first pick. Thirdly, if even after that we want to add more people, or we need to add more people, or we don't need to add more people, but a Yid feels that it's his tafkid to be in the army, I do think that 2 things need to happen first. Number 1 is, if at all possible, and I don't mean financially possible, I mean unless there's an imminent threat, if it's at all possible, that person should be learning for a couple of years before they go into the army. Not just a simple year or 2 of getting their bearings. They should be able to know how to learn, be a mature, advanced adult, have a lot of musar under their belt, and know how to navigate really difficult situations. The Rambam in Mor Nevuchim talks about how the dream, well, he calls it a dream, but the ladder there was the observation of Malachim going up and down the ladder, and that was comparable, the Nimshal is to the Nevi'im, that they have to raise themselves up first before they could come down and give stuff that we really needed to the rest of Klal Yisroel. And the same thing is true here for the army, especially since there's a spiritual danger. Lastly, also what's needed is that the army should be a much more, pleasant isn't the right word, but conducive, spiritually conducive environment for our soldiers. It should be a David HaMelech's army. It should be an army full of Torah, extreme physical training, midos, etc., etc. And there should be a massive push. I think that the reaction to be pulling people out of the Beis Midrash is the 1948 emergency nuclear option, and should only be used in those circumstances. That's my personal belief. I hope you all enjoy and grow from what we have in store. Okay, so we have the schus today of having Rabbi Commander Michael Goldman from New Jersey. He served in the IDF in Tzanchanim from 2013 to 2015. Excuse me, Tzanchanim, that's paratrooper, right? Okay, great. Eventually becoming a commander of a sniper team. He has served over 300 days during the current war, or hopefully the war's over, Charvot Barzel, including stints in Lebanon and Syria. He went to Yeshivas Torat Shraga and learned in the YU and Gruss Kollel, earning him semicha, and is a close talmid of Rav Mordechai Willig. He currently teaches in Yeshivas Torat Shraga and Machon. And of course, his biggest claim to fame is having a world-famous superior chavrus who will remain nameless. Michael, we're so happy to have you today. Thank you so much for coming. So I kind of want to open this up with something that happened to us years ago, which I think that you were kind of surprised by, and validly so. But one of the first questions I asked you when I really knew about your military background is if you've ever killed someone, which is a really weird question, okay? Because if you're a 17-year-old asking the question, okay, then you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like you killed someone, right? Because video games are real. But I think you caught on when I asked the question, that's not really, I was not after your kill count. I think that it's such a wild avoda to do a very intense thing for Klal Yisroel. We just pretend these things don't really happen, and we kind of say, yeah, people are at war, we're learning, we're playing, we're at work, but what is it like, to take a life, and that's kind of what I was after, and I want people to know what that is, because being on the front lines and fighting for Klal Yisroel is not a joke, and people need to know what that means, right? So we'll open that up, but I'll add just one more story. So we don't just think about this in the realm of soldiers on the battlefield. It's true for doctors. It's true for Rabbanim. So I remember one time it really hit me. I was by Morva Rabbi's house, by Rav Asher's house, and I was learning with him. More accurately, he was teaching me. And he got a call, an emergency call in the middle. And it was a couple from America, and their baby had a very serious issue. And I won't go into all the details, but basically what happens when the baby has this sort of issue is they're at the maximum amount of pain that the body can handle, and they will be that way for the rest of their life until they die. That's just how it works, and they usually live to be around 3 years old. And so he was managing, do you put them on life support, not put them on life support, etc. And to just see such a dark thing in front of you, and then someone just deals with it because that's just their job. Of course, we all know that this happens all the time, right? But we don't really understand what it means. So I think it's really important. I'd love to learn myself from your background what it's all about. So before I jump in with my questions, is there something that you want to make clear now, or?
I just apologize. I lost my voice a little bit. But, hopefully the mic will do a good enough job with that. And I appreciate the opportunity just to come, speak, catch up.
Sure.
It's nice to know you're very consistent many years later, asking the same first questions as you asked back then. But you gave a nice introduction. So
I did give a nice introduction. I'm happy you agreed with all of it. Okay, so number one, fighting for Klal Yisroel. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? You've actually fought. We can move on to the darker stuff for a second. Someone is on the front lines. He's getting shot at. You're not with your wife and kids. You're fighting for Klal Yisroel. What does that practically mean, and how does that feel? What are we not getting?
I've gone through it in two different stages of life. So, and it was interesting to reflect now difference of feelings of things. Being in Miluim now during the war now, and 2013 to 15 was during the war of Tzuk Eitan. The last time we were in Gaza it looked very different than what it did this time. Part of the reason why it happened this time was because it looked so different back then.
I'm going to interrupt. Why was it so different?
We didn't go in so far. A lot of warnings beforehand, and it ended after 2 weeks without. I mean, a certain amount was accomplished, but certainly not. There was much less face-to-face fighting really that happened then in that war. There were small incidents, but it wasn't like what pretty much every soldier that was there this time I think encountered and experienced. So on that end, it was very different. They dealt with some of the problems, but certainly not all, on a very different level and scale. Nevertheless, like when you're 20, what your responsibilities are and where you're holding in life makes you think about things very differently. Much more easy in terms of there's always a certain nervousness, and it was very real. Like definitely felt like very real. And there was parts where like, wow, like I have so much left to accomplish in life, and like what if? Definitely goes through your mind. There's no question about that. But I think it was still a little bit less heavy then at age 20, without a family, without kids, without other responsibilities that you have, right, as opposed to this time. This time we weren't in Gaza. My group was in Lebanon and Syria, the most recent time. I'm part of the Knisa and going inside to Lebanon. The war also was fought very differently in different places. So, by Lebanon, most of Hezbollah, ran away. But in every place, there was always a few that stuck. The hardcore
really?
that were martyrs. You just weren't sure if it was going to be in your area where you were, if it was going to be your group that encounters them, or another group. But you knew, and you hear the news. If you knew the group that went in 4 days before in this place, was ambushed, injuries, people killed, and in that sense, it was very real. A lot of also what was different is the main risk is which I think mentally is very different to deal with, was one that's oftentimes not something that you see, but was a risk from like far away. And having rockets or missiles shot at you, or that risk always being there, so you never see the person then. They're miles away from you. And it's easier sometimes to ignore that and kind of be able to move through that when you don't see it face to face.
Is it because you get used to it?
So for sure that happens. There's no question. It's fascinating to watch. Everybody just assumes like when you go into war, then then we'll be different, and it's not true. And on many levels, it manifested itself. Soldiers have become more relaxed after 2 days you're there. In the beginning, nobody would take off their shoes, and you were sleeping on, bulletproof vest and everything to be ready. And like 2 days in, all of a sudden, like people like walking around, like like it's their home. Like what are you doing?
Right.
And that was something that to see that in like human nature, ability to get used to something, was very interesting to see, and something though that you try, and for sure, personally try as best to not give in to that, both because the danger was certainly real, and we had people in our group that that were injured. We had people, we had 4 that were killed, actually not while even in almost the direct fighting, but while searching for weapons in different parts, that ended up triggering like a mine inside a cave, and 4 of them were killed in there. And that happens, and those people, you'd worked together with those people, and so it's there for sure. And the real thing is just a constant, and my wife and I spoke about this multiple times, of the value of what you cared about is worth it to put yourself at risk. There's no pretending that the risk isn't there. There's no question.
Do you feel that when you're doing it? Because you're called up. You can't really say no.
You can, just like the Charedim say no. So like whoever doesn't want to go, doesn't go. Meaning like, and it's not just the Charedim, many other people, the percentage of people in combat, not in combat, is very skewed to not combat. Now, some of them are very useful jobs, and many of the things that happen are not useful things necessarily. And somebody who doesn't want to go doesn't go. And even in people who had been in our reserve group at a certain point, and everybody has different reasons, and some more valid than others. And at a certain point, some of those people just had enough, they can't. And they don't come. In the end, everybody who was there chose to be there. You can't force somebody to do it in the end. So it's a choice.
Did you feel that you were leaning into that the whole time? Like, I want to be here.
Yeah. Meaning, I don't want to be here.
Meaning,
but
because of the circumstances.
Yes, yeah. It's. I think
even
this is
in
the
the
right
thick
thing.
of it.
This is the right thing to do.
Wow.
And you need that. I think if you don't have that, and you don't have that mindset, I just think most people who don't have that end up leaving.
Do you think most people have that mindset?
Yeah, some speak about it more, but at the end of like every one of the svavim, every one of like the rotations or times that we were called back, so they have like meetings, and we have group sessions, and people talk about it. And this past one, we had one earlier this week, and like multiple people brought that up, that like we're here because we believe in this, and that's one of the most unique experiences, to be surrounded by people that love and care about Klal Yisroel that much. There's nowhere else you could go that you'd experience something like that. It doesn't exist. That from the least religious to most religious person there, to have that is a very, very special experience. To be around, you're surrounded by that constantly. Like, they're constantly making that decision. Every time they come back to base, they made that decision. And that was very special to be a part of.
You think that causes a bond outside of base? Meaning walking around, chilunim, charedim, whatever, do you think they feel a bit closer because of that?
Who? Meaning the people who were
the people that went,
group?
That went, yeah.
For sure,
because they realized they fought for Klal Yisroel, and it doesn't matter who you were.
Yeah, without question, it builds a care of all the people around you. Like, I did all this for you. It builds sometimes like there's a challenge where you've done much more than people around you also. A lot of people struggle with that, where like, I'm doing my part, and you feel like others aren't, and you're surrounded by people that don't care as much. Is a very challenging thing to change settings and environments like that, where you're working sometimes almost on a different value system than other people. It's hard to be around people. Yeah.
Does it bother you enough that you feel that you have trouble integrating with other people that don't share those beliefs?
Yeah. I think one of the reasons it'd be very challenging to like go back and live in America right now is that. I think I'd feel it even more there. I think, there's obviously different levels that people have in general, but I think here, when you're around it, even people not necessarily doing that and serving, I think still when you were here and surrounded by it, you felt it much more. And that at least makes it easier to relate and connect to people there. I do think there were people, not to say that everybody in America didn't, but I still think it was different and the experiences are different, and part of it is you just can't. If you don't see and don't experience certain things in person, it's much harder to connect. Even the people who spend time going to levayas. Somebody who does that and experiences that on somewhat of a consistent basis has a very different connection to what's going on than somebody who's not, and somebody in America just can't.
Right.
So maybe they come once a year and try to, but you can't plan that obviously, and again, what is their fault is that they chose to live there and not here, and that makes it a part of that. But it's going to be different. And I think that would definitely make it challenging for sure. And here it exists sometimes also.
You said that it was a little bit lighter when you were younger because you had less people that were relying on you. Did you feel that achrayas when? Well, here, let me start it this way. Did you see combat?
Yeah, so we had a few times that like rockets and stuff were sent. It was really amazing to watch like Iron Dome blow up above you. It was like a wild experience. And again, we had people that were 3 minutes before, like where we were walking was where like rocket fell. That was like the group that was there. We were the group that was searching here, and the other group was the one searching there. That that something happened. So that certainly happened. We didn't have like face-to-face in terms of that. There's times that like sometimes different things were like you heard gunshots or you heard things and like you worked together with the Air Force and like we found out a day later that like we killed together with the Air Force, like you directed and killed somebody. So there's a lot of things where like you didn't see exactly what was happening. You're working together with like lots of other groups in terms of that. So that was I guess part one. The next part was... So
let's talk about that heaviness now.
Yeah.
So you weren't just like a soldier, you were a soldier that definitely felt danger.
Yeah.
Okay, so that heaviness was, in that moment, I could get killed and my family's going to be without me?
Yeah, again, I think you try not to focus on, what could happen and much more so on like, okay, what do I do now though to do a better job to prevent things from happening? And trying to be as careful as possible. Usually the things that help keep you safe are really annoying to do.
Like keeping your vest on?
Yeah, keeping your vest on, sleeping with that. Like, what do you do about the helmet? Like, you can't really fall asleep with the helmet on. So it's like, how do I position my head that it's like mostly in the helmet, and sometimes you justify things to yourself that maybe you shouldn't have, and different things like that. And each person kind of is judging for themselves how much they assess the level of danger to be and the risk versus the reward depending on that decision. How careful you are of where you put yourself in terms of where you're visible to the other side. That they're looking for you. There's no question. So like, are you careful to make sure that, when you go from one place to the next place that, you're actually ducking down, or you crawl if need be to make sure that you're not seen or not. It's easier to just walk. And those are things that I think you try much harder. I think you try much harder now to be careful about doing things in the right way to keep yourself safe.
Do you think that it causes a automatic nearing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because you feel that danger and He's with you, or not so?
For sure. I feel like I felt a real change in tefillos without question. You're really talking, to God and begging Hashem in a real way. And there was times that it was also just like your head's in so many places that it was just like, it's harder sometimes, to daven, but on the other hand, many times it was much easier and very real, very real. And that changes also then your relationship with Hashem, moving forward. Whenever you have a breakthrough in a relationship like that, so that's something that continues. And it's something that you can't quantify. And I think one of the reasons why it's so hard for people in terms of, defining, where's their religious growth is it's not a checking box like davening with a minyan. If I daven, that's easy. Did I daven shachas with a minyan? Did I daven mincha with a minyan? Sure. Was my tefillah better? It's, can't check a box like that. It's not quantifiable, but you could feel and notice differences in different things. And many times for sure felt like I'm talking with you, Hashem, and I'm relying on you. It doesn't make sense what's going to happen here, and I know it's not in my control.
Right. What I find very interesting, and I don't say this as a critique, is that I'm asking, what does it mean to be fighting for Klal Yisroel? I know that you've had so much discomfort from just leaving your home and going up north and coming back down and going up north, and I don't even know what Hagim you missed. But you didn't even mention that. And I'm sure it was chashuv to you. It's because these points hit you much harder. But why don't you share with everyone also what that's like to just be torn away from your family like that?
Yeah, very hard, very challenging. There's obviously more stress at home. Even when you are home, one of the biggest challenges is like you always feel like you're leaving soon. So you're like trying to, catch up on things, but you're trying to catch up both in family and in work life. You want that. I do things that I love doing. I don't want to lose those opportunities and for that to be affected either. I'll share a story. One of the Shabbases that I was home, so maybe it was 2-3 months into the war. I don't remember exactly. I think it was 2 or 3 months into the war. So I was home for Shabbos, and my wife had made dessert. She made like an apple crisp. I think she had made like personal ones, whatever. So like, everybody got one at the table. Me and my wife, kids, everybody had one, and then there was one left. So my daughter's like, let Abba have it. He's our special Shabbos guest.
Wow.
Have like your 6-year-old daughter like call her father a guest is it's crazy, and like you realize that different times where like your kids are acting out. They would never be able to express. They weren't old enough to express like what it is and what's going on. But that happened. One of the friends, the group that I was in, he said he came back. We were talking. He said like his son was toilet trained. His son was like young. And he's like, all of a sudden, like, son, 3-4 years old, like, not toilet trained anymore. Like, accents, like, all over the place.
That's their trauma.
And yeah, and the kid can't tell him, like, it's very obvious why. And now his wife is dealing with that by herself, without help, and there's no support, and tremendously challenging. And each time that you're making the decision, it's one of, that is, the major factor that's the consideration. Do I go back or not? What's the effect on the family, and how do you gauge, like, at what point, and there are people that felt at some point it was too much, and they couldn't. And everybody's different. Each person, their relationship is different, and how that works, and how they're able to manage that. Different people deal with things better, and each one also depends how much support they have. On the outside also helps change those things.
Right.
But definitely the biggest challenge with that question was that.
What'd you tell your kids when you left?
Our kids are young. I actually spoke with a psychologist about,
Very smart. That sounds like a very smart thing. I'm not sure everyone does that.
Yeah. They tried running. I think they started, a year in or so trying to run more sessions, to help people like what to do.
I'm sorry. Did you come up with this on your own? Like I'm going to speak to a professional?
It was probably like as certain issues came up, like we kind of like, it was something that thankfully like not scared of, and there are people that know more and how to deal with these things. Just like I want to do the right thing,
So I just have to stop you for a second to make a point, because this is just so important. So we'll remain nameless, but there's a certain very big Rav that I know a bunch of them. Don't try to guess. Okay, but he shared with me an early experience, or I don't know, he was in his 40s or 50s or something, and he was working in a particular yeshiva, and there was a boy that came for the year, and his mother had terminal cancer, and she knew beforehand. And she said, we're sending my son this year because he has to have a normal year, and I'm going to die in the middle of the year, but I don't want him to know. So I'm trusting you, Rabbi, with this information, which that is so heavy. And the Rav said, okay, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that he has the most normal year. And what happened was the child, his mother passed away, and he went back home for the shiva and everything, and he came back years later. And he sought out this Rav. He came to Eretz Yisrael just to seek out this Rav, with tattooed and earrings or whatever. And he said, I just want you to know that I'm not from, and it's because of you. You took my mother away from me, and I will never forgive you for it. So this Rav asked me, what did I do wrong? I said, I don't know. You followed literally everything, You listened to the mother, you respected her wish, you tried everything you could to make the kid feel comfortable. He said, I made such a simple mistake. I'm like, what? He says, I'm not a psychological expert. And I didn't even ask for advice, right? So I think what you're saying is somewhat novel. I'm like struck by it. People, when they're having very difficult shifts in their life, should be asking advice from professionals, especially with young children, right? So it's amazing that you did that. I'm sorry, go ahead, continue.
So, he was very clear with kids at the age that we had that you don't scare them. They're not old enough to understand nuance. I mean, I was gonna be okay. He's going to be the way. He'll come back and that's it. And you don't need to say bye because you never know.
Did you say you were fighting or just no? You're just going.
I was going to be the way. I was fighting the Rishayim. That's what my kids know that he's fighting the Rishayim, getting rid of Rishayim. Why are you going again? Because they're still Rishayim, and as long as they're still Rishayim, then somebody has to go.
Right.
And it's honest. There's no lying.
Right.
But you keep it as simple as clear for them, and I imagine, again, if I had older kids, I hope, people with older kids, so the conversation is a little bit different depending on the age, and that's where I think the seeking out people that understand this, is important. And that made it easy. It was like very clear guidance, and that made sense. And like, I think very good and like helpful for our kids on that. It doesn't change the challenges of like a parent not being there all the time. But at least in terms of that question, that was how we dealt with it.
You know what I think is ignored a lot? I'm not saying you don't ignore it. What I think is ignored a lot is the sacrifice that spouses make.
Yeah.
Which I just think is unbelievable.
I've always been very frustrated by that, actually.
Because it's ignored.
Yeah. It's forgotten, and again, I think sometimes it's an example where there was a lot of room for really creative chesed.
Absolutely.
And learning how to do chesed right. And there's big differences of, for example, she had like somebody and like very appreciative. Everybody's always like, tell me anything you need.
Right.
Very few people like asking for help, and most people don't, especially somebody who's been functioning normally, and it's not due to anything of their fault that they're in the situation. You feel somewhat nebuch sometimes when you have to ask for help in like constantly in different areas. There's others who's just like text, they're like, I'm bringing dinner on Tuesday, done. There wasn't like any negotiation. It wasn't like, it was like, that's what I'm doing. I'm just letting you know I'm going to drop it off at this time. And she didn't have to like ask, she didn't have to feel bad. It was done. And that was, there was a few instances where people did that and it made a big difference. But it doesn't happen a lot, and it's hard. And you're dealing with things by yourself like constantly, and you're by yourself constantly. And very challenging for sure.
There's a retreat that this is just what I was thinking. Again, no one does this, but maybe someone should take this idea. But there's this retreat that I saw in Mishpacha magazine or something, I don't know, years ago, for people that have children with very, very serious autism. So that there's like a summer retreat, 2 weeks. The mother goes and just relaxes, and the kid, they like send him or her to a camp or whatever. It's like so thoughtful. There should be the same thing for like a spouse when like their husband is just out to work. You don't know if he's coming back. It's a lot of stress. Right. I feel like we ignore that a lot.
One of the other challenges it's a challenge that I'm not really sure there's a solution. One of the reasons why it creates problem, every person's situation is different. But let's say like my wife works also. So in Miluim, like when you're called to Miluim, you're off from work. So even the days that you're off, like I don't have to go back to work, meaning I'm in Miluim for the next 2.5 months. And officially, like I don't have to go back. I'm in that, and they cover your salary, they cover your. That's how like it works, but it doesn't work that way for your spouse.
Right.
Like their company doesn't give them off because their husband's in Miluim.
And they're doing everything.
Right. Yeah. They're doing everything, and then even if it's like okay, so then like they give you extra vacation days when you end to kind of have time to like reacclimate. It's not that like you finish Miluim the next day you go back, which is very smart and very helpful for people. Even sometimes like couples where like they'd want to do some things like she has a limited number of vacation days or like she's still working. She can't necessarily take off now.
Very cautious.
So it's like that's a challenge. And then you're back in work and like and you can. So I think those are challenges that come up that again obviously in the scheme of like the level of challenges that have existed on throughout the war, it doesn't hit the top 10 oftentimes necessarily of things in terms of gravity but it's there in a real way. Sometimes there are it can lead to, for sure, life-altering, ramifications for different couples and families. Has been something that they've become very aware of. But it's not spoken about because, it's not a physical injury. It's less apparent to people, and understand why, but it's very much there.
This is part of the reason, and if we have time, we'll probably argue about this pretty heatedly. So I'm saving this till the end. But, 9 out of 10 people that like Bacham, that asked me if they should go to the army, I say no. And again, we'll argue about it. But for me, the army needs to be a David HaMelech's army. So people that are not learning, so instead of them, going to Thailand or whatever it is, they can go fight. And people that are learning should stay learning. But what drives me crazy is people that are in learning or not in learning, and then they disparage like soldiers. They don't. It's not the neutrality, which I still think is a hate. But it's just, look at that soldier, right? And like all the things that you're saying here is like such a wild sacrifice. But I think just part of it is because you don't exist. You were in the army. Michael's in the army. But how does his spouse think? What is he telling his kids, right? Does he fear for his life? I guarantee you they're not thinking about that. Because no one would have the asses to say those things unless they were mentally deranged, right?
And they also most people don't ask. They don't know people and they're not seeking out the conversation.
So thoughtless. You know what I'm saying?
Again, It is. I mean, that's the problem. But if people were more thoughtful, then you could find out. Or if you went and listened to people speak, there are people that speak about it, then you'd start to learn.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do here. People need to know. And it's not about Haredi, not Haredi. It could be, a modern guy. You just have no idea what it's like. Right?
100%.
Okay, so let's move on to a little bit of a heavier topic. So, you have seen combat before. Have you taken a life? You don't have to answer directly if you don't wish to. But what I'm trying to get at is, what does that mean? Because again, this is something we're never going to understand fully, and we're just going to say maybe you did, maybe you didn't, right? But like that, in my opinion, I feel that most people that take a life, even if it's a Russia, I don't think they're just like yes, I got another one on my kill count. Like I don't think that's the reaction. I think it's a very disturbing thing to do to end a life, no matter who it is. So what is that like? What can you share with us that can give us a deeper appreciation of that sacrifice that people are making for Klal Yisroel? Because I do think it's a sacrifice for a person to kill a Russia. I think that's a sacrifice.
For sure. There's no question, you see it in the number of soldiers coming back from fighting in Gaza that this is like a struggle for. It's lots of different things.
But why is it? Like, unpack it.
So I've had different experiences. I can't say for sure, like, vada'u, yes about any. There was no, 10 feet away. If so, man, we did a bad job until then. There's a lot where you work together with teams, and there's, multiple people involved, in terms of that. People there, and they're listening, and then you're directing over the radio, and some things it's just easier, we could try to, throw a grenade, or, we could just drop a bomb on them, and, they're gone for sure, and, that's easier. So but okay, so I guess the guy who pushed the button on the drone probably feels, yeah, but Lamaisa, the people that were there and found and heard and directed are, more directly involved. And there's other times where you're shooting at something, you think you saw something, you're not sure, and you don't necessarily go to check. It's too dangerous to go to there. So you have no idea. You did what you were supposed to, you didn't, you thought maybe there was a danger, and now, there's no shooting and nothing's happening. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, I have no idea.
Okay, so then I would say this. Unpack what it's like to, you were involved in directing airstrikes.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm that feels a lot more than me, who has never directed an airstrike. No one has died because of me. At least I sincerely hope not. Okay? So you can unpack that a bit, but maybe you've had, relationships with people that have taken lives. Yeah. What do they go through?
It's hard. I think for sure the goal is people focusing on they didn't deserve to be in the world, and I made the world a better place. And for a lot, it's also, I think, for a lot of people, a tremendous focus on the people that you love, and these are the people, I did this for them. I'm trying to keep them safe. Let's say a person, wouldn't want to kill an animal, but if you were next to somebody who was deathly allergic to bees, and there was a bee there, you would feel good about having killed the bee and saving that person. Now, obviously, we relate different to, a bug versus, another person. But on the other hand, also in a lot of the, speaking about it with the guys around, they're not really human beings anymore.
Well, I don't know about that because, I was in Budapest recently, and we had a tour guide that was explaining some of the horrible things that the Hungarian Nazis did to Jews. And there's a long list. And he said something, and it really resonated with me. He said, people call Nazis animals. He says, you can't call a Nazi an animal. A Nazi's a human being. Why? Animals don't build concentration camps. Humans build concentration camps. So I think they might destroy the ethos of what it means to be man, but they have sown the seeds of evil and have reaped it, right? And are using it to the evil six, which is what you meant, but still you feel like you're taking a life, right?
On the other hand, you were worse than an animal when you had potential to do much more and do good things, and you did way worse. You're worse than an animal. Animal never had that potential to do that, so that whatever the animal does, okay, fine. And you could have done good things, and you constantly made choices and led yourself to become that type of person, and you're responsible for the choices that you make, even if it would have been harder for you because you had a bad education.
Do you think people feel this way? I feel like people don't rationalize it so well. I feel like most people that have taken lives in war are scarred by it.
Again, I think so, just because it's a jarring experience. But again, I think a lot of it also has to do with just the trauma of everything happening around you. And oftentimes it comes along with your association of that was somebody next to you was either killed or severely hurt. And I think, and how scared you felt, during those moments. And I think.
So you think that's more common? You think that?
I think that's definitely very common. I don't. Again, I haven't spoken to enough people to know, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. I don't know if it's as much always a trauma of specifically like feel like guilt or feeling bad, obviously, at all in any way of killing those people.
Interesting.
That I don't think there's as much.
Okay, and how about the other experience that you just talked about of losing a friend or seeing a comrade severely injured right next to you, and that could have been you?
Yeah, scary. It makes it very real. There was no part there that there's no video game element, of the experience. It's very real. And you think, you listen to the families speak after and the effect, that it's going to have for years to come for their wife, for their kids, is it's hard. It's very hard. But we also everyone understands like why we made the decisions that we made. And on that end, for a person that you were around and you saw that, he was willing and lived for something much greater than him, there's a comfort of the person knowing that they did something great, in life. And it wasn't for the attention or anything like that.
Right.
There's something special about that also, at least. And that's a comfort, at least, that you try to remind yourself of that.
Right. Okay, before I switch gears, is there anything else this is very enlightening. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about what it means to fight for Klal Yisroel in a very real way?
Sure. Just one thing I think on the religious level, I think there's a lot more happening that people realize.
What do you mean by that? Oh, are you meaning like referring to the thing that I was talking about before about guys going to the army, or just Stamazé, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Like learning-wise, I know a Rav who he said he can't say it publicly because it would cause too much, different reactions. But he thinks that one of the most successful Kiruv organizations in the world right now is
really?
That, yeah. And it's true, and
that's
watch
wild.
it. It was amazing to watch, and I think it was less even by me than other groups, because more people I also are older and more set still in their ways already, so it's harder, at that point to change. But people doing certain mitzvos and tzitzis and tefillin and davening. I felt like Chabad when we were called up Sukkot, a year ago when we went into Lebanon. And I brought lulav and etrog with me both when we were training, preparing to go in, and inside Lebanon I brought it with me. And like the least religious people were like, everybody was happy, like shake lulav and etrog.
But is that a war thing? Like maybe that's a war thing. Maybe that's not an army thing.
So again, but there were also parts that we've had that didn't feel exactly like war, that you saw some of the same thing also. Mm-hmm. And then on people who were religious, of being more committed, you saw to davening, to learning. I gave shiurim a bunch of different times, and like people were coming. You had every excuse not to come. Nobody's gonna say anything. Nobody cares, and like there was a real interest and a thirst for it, and that's happening a lot. On an individual level, opportunity to learn. Like there's plenty of downtime. Like I was able to accomplish, Baruch Hashem, like significant amount learning-wise also. You see like the pictures and videos sometimes of like the guys like finish Shas, while they're there, and like obviously like that's it's amazing. And there were a lot of things I think that were smaller accomplishments that are happening also constantly. That like it's not Shas, so we don't necessarily make like a big flyer about it, but it was a big deal. I'll say it just because I think it's important for people to hear and to see like how much happens there. Like while over together between all of the different times going back. So I finished Tamid, Kinim, Midos, Chazer, the last two prakim of all of Ksuvas 12th and 13th parak. Inside Lebanon, Chazer, the entire 8th parak of Bava Metzia and the 10th parak of Bava Metzia, half of the 7th parak, half of the 9th parak. I think part of the second I don't remember, and the first part also, I don't remember exactly how much, part of Brachos. We were learning in Yeshiva then. And there were other people doing that also. A number of people around doing Daf Yomi and staying up with Daf Yomi. How many Masechtos did they finish? I don't know, it depends on what Masechah we were up to. If it was a 130 Daf Masechet or shorter, whether they finished 2 or 4 or 5. But that's happening. And it's happening with tznius of this is just who there are, and there's a lot of people there like that.
Okay, so let's go. That is the next topic. So let's go farther into that. Religious life in the army. Listen, you had a title in my life for a while of the only guy that I asked that, did you go to the army and you made you from, and you're like, I think so. Okay, from virtually anyone else that I know, they're all like, no, it damaged me, but I recovered, and I did have some valuable experiences in the Army. But no one ever says like, yeah, the Army, that was the right choice for my connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So you're gonna have to convince me why religious life in the Army really even exists or is worthwhile. Because you'd also have to make the argument, because if you can't make that argument, then I don't know why we would ever tell Bachram and Yeshiva as the next step to be fighting for Klal Yisroel.
Yeah, I actually said I had the argument while in the Army with a friend, who he defined at that point one of the options of like, Dad, he's like, listen, you'll become a little bit less religious in the Army, and then like afterwards you'll like that, like no, like that's not, that you're wrong. If you think it's that, then you're wrong. Like I agree with that. I think this will come back to a point that we made earlier though, which is, especially as an American, Americans like defining things that you can quantify. You like defining your religious observance by things that you can quantify. And don't make the mistake that I'm saying that these things don't matter. They do. I'm not going to tell you at all that davening with a minion doesn't matter. It does. But we like, defining, am I growing religiously? Am I doing more things that I can check off and say I did this? We like defining things that way. So if you want to, if that's how you're going to define Avodas Hashem, well, one, your life is sad and you'll probably have a very limited relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, A, and B, you're wrong. Now, what makes the conversation complicated is that, adding in the other parts that you can't just check a box and count is very hard to talk about, and how do we see what growth is. But I'll give examples. One was tefillah. So I think people who, certain experiences and doing certain things change your tefillah for the rest of your life.
In basic training?
Yeah, and after that even. You realize that one, life is short. You realize that's going to happen, and you want to take advantage of things. You realize that things become much more real. Davening, the challenge of davening is, can you make davening real? Can you feel in a real way, I'm talking to Hashem?
Right.
If things in life in general for you aren't real, then it's why all of a sudden davening is going to become real. It's hard. But if all of a sudden you have other experiences that make things in your life real, well, that changes, again, that flows over to other areas of your life. Tefillah is a great example of that. And so if somebody's kavanah, let's say they missed, because they were there, so they davened with a minion less times, and it was mutter in those situations. Mm-hmm. But their kavanah is better for the rest of their life than the other guy who didn't do that.
Oh, but that's a very different equation. How about
agreed?
How about learning 8 hours a day? Instead of learning 8 hours a day, you're learning half an hour at best, because you're tired at the end of the day.
Sure, definitely happens. Now again, part of the question also is if a person is doing what they're supposed to. If a person was doing chesed all day long, and that was what their tafkid was, and they learned their hour a day, they wake up early and they learn an hour a day, and they're mamish chesed morning to night.
If that's what their tafkid was, yeah. If Hakadosh Baruch Hu told them, yeah, that's
so the advantage that you have here is that everything you're doing while you're there in the Army, you're osik in a mitzvah the entire time.
Yeah, but is that your tafkid?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you're not doing it.
Right. Because I'm not doing it.
I'm saying since you're not, so you're going to get killed. And everybody else is going to get killed.
I didn't get killed.
So somebody has to do it. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so you know what I'm saying? But I made a decision. I didn't fight.
Right, but Hashem wanted you to, and Hashem said that the Jewish people should. Very clear.
Hashem said the Jewish people should fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't have to fight.
Also said that everybody, when there's an opportunity, is required as best as they can to help protect the Jewish people in a situation of pikuach nefesh. There's no question about that.
Right. So there's a difference between mechamis rishos and mechamis mitzvah, right?
And so
right. So this is
even so right now, even if you didn't want to call it mechamis mitzvah, there's no question that we're in a pikuach nefesh situation, which is different. It's not the same. I don't need to define it as mechamis mitzvah for it to even be a mitzvah in the realm of pikuach nefesh.
For sure. I don't think it's so crazy to call it a mechamis mitzvah.
I'm just saying. But I'm saying even if you didn't want to go there.
But even
I don't even think you need to.
Because if you call it a mechamis, watch. Do you think it's haguni? Mechamis mitzvah. You're being attacked by 10 Canaanim. Okay, and you have a population of 250 million men. Let's make it ridiculous. Do all 250 million men have to show up to the battlefield to kill those 10 Canaanim?
So if your question is just simply, do we have enough people right now? The answer is no.
Okay, how do you know that?
Because I'm there. I'll give a few examples. Mm-hmm. On a few levels. One, at a certain point also, and we keep seeing this, less and less people keep coming back. Because you can't have people in this situation for this extended period of time. And even some people who do keep going back end up messed up for the rest of their life, which probably means some of them shouldn't have kept going at a certain point. It was too much. That's A. B, there's lots of times, and this is something that publicly, and maybe just because on a safety level they have to. But the Army will always say, like, we're doing everything we need to, and all the officers say, like, we're doing everything we need to, and it's not true. There are times, or you're doing something and it should have been done in a much better way. I'll give an example. We were told to do an ambush by the border of Lebanon, and they had a concern that maybe there was going to be a group of terrorists that were coming, and they wanted like a sniper team, overlooking the area where they thought they might come in. So an ambush like that, where we were going to be all the way off to the side, like inside a forest, I had to navigate like how to get there, find a place like you'd be able to see the area from, and you're totally removed from like everybody else. We were going to be a couple miles away from any other group that'd be close to us, and in order to do something like that, minimum we should have had 8 people. We were 3. Why? Because you can't ask people to come to me and stay there for 2.5 months straight. It's not going to happen. You would have 0 people then. So we were at a third of the group. So there was only 3 of us there. So the head officer is like classic Army thinking. Is like, no, we said we're going to do it. You have to do it. So like our commander was like no. He's like, it's dangerous. I can't do that. The head officer wouldn't listen.
Okay, so let me start.
Now, he won't see this, so I can say it. We're like, okay, fine, and we just didn't do it. Mm-hmm. Because it was dangerous. Now, Baruch Hashem, nothing happened, but
that was a liability, yeah.
Yeah, and Jewish people were in more danger because of that. And it was a very simple numbers game. And that's in our group, and that happened multiple times. Or when we did do it, and everybody's life was at danger more because you did it with 4 people instead of 8, and that professionally would have been the way that it should have been done. There's no question about that.
So then why can't I make the argument, so go recruit the people that are clubbing in Tel Aviv? There's plenty of them, right? Why us?
Because I thought that you were a group of people that had values and do the right thing.
We do.
But they don't.
Well, they should be encouraged to do that.
Encourage them. If you get them to do that, great. Until then, right now.
So I say that's what should be done.
But even with that, I'm still not sure that it makes sense, because if it's the right thing to do, then you should do it. Why would you not want to do the right thing?
It's not about doing the right thing.
The other thing is I'm not sure what you're fighting. Are you just believing that like, no, if I could have as many people learning as possible all the time, and you want to also define, I would love for somebody to finally give a definition of Torah Umnaso. Would be amazing if somebody would actually publicly say definition of Torah Umnaso, and be very careful, because it's highly unlikely that there are very few percentage of people that are actually Torah Umnaso.
Nice to meet you.
Could be year one, but very few. And I would want you to define it. How much time are you allowed to spend with your family if you're Torah Umnaso? Are you allowed to pick up your kids, or should your wife have to do that if you're Torah Umnaso? How much are you allowed to help around the house for Torah Umnaso?
No, I think there's
Are you allowed to take breaks?
100%.
Is there a ban Zmanim Torah Umnaso? Are you allowed to stop learning regular Seder Shir then? Or is it just like the days of Chag you're home? But but nobody wants to say that.
I don't mind having that discussion. I think that's a great question, but
that's more halachic, and
it could be. I don't mind talking about it, but to me, I'm like, look, I think that there is. I'd split up into 2 categories. One is, if Klal Yisroel is in an emergency situation and all hands on deck, then all hands on deck. He saw that in 1948. It didn't really matter.
Isn't that different?
So we can I don't know. If now is not different, then the street should be empty. And we should. I mean, Baruch Hashem. Now I hope it is different now. In other words, I hope there's no war. Okay, but
so the issue and the difference between now and using 1948 as an example was that warfare has changed tremendously. In 1948, you fought even if you had absolutely no training, and you do that. I'm not going to do that because it's dumb, and you're going to put everybody at risk if I put people that don't know what they're doing out there. I mean, you could be like, oh, give me a gun.
No, that's not.
But that's it doesn't work that way.
It's not about it working the other way or not. It's not my point, though. My point is,
then if you believe that there could and there will, and likely, unless Mashiach comes soon, these situations happen. Historically, let's just look. It's about every 5 to 7 years that we end up in something like this. Hopefully it'll be much longer, but historically we just look. That's basically how it works out. So if you believe then that when all hands on deck are needed, then we would come help. Well, then you need to do something beforehand to make sure that you could be one of those people. But you constantly make the choice not to. So you're irrelevant to me when it happens. You've chosen to make yourself irrelevant.
So okay, we can unpack that too. But again, there's 2 situations. There's one that you wouldn't disagree with me that if it was all hands on deck right now and we needed every single living soul on the front lines, they should all be on the front lines. That's easy, right? Meaning, if it was a 1948 situation, then it's a 1948 situation. Okay. Now, we can discuss whether this war was that situation or not. But I'm saying there I would agree with you. There, everyone has to be in the front lines. Then there's the situation where you don't need to be on the front lines right now. So then the question is do you either, is the responsibility of Klal Yisroel to change their army to be as such, where it's a positive religious experience for everyone, which I think the answer is yes to, or is it that you need to triple down and be grabbing all those people that are deserters? And I don't just mean from the Haredi Welt, I mean the Chiloni Welt also. Yeah. Like, there's a tremendous amount of people that could be in the army and they don't need to be clubbing in Tel Aviv or Havdel Afavdel is learning, or Chatzi learning, right? Or whatever it may be, right? So I'm not, the immediate teguva of saying everyone needs to do their part, let's just pull people out of yeshiva, and we get a lot of good moral people doing that, I think is a violation of Osek b'mitzvah, Pater mina mitzvah, Osek b'Torah, Pater mina mitzvah, right? It's only, you can only stop learning Torah if it's a mitzvah yishar lasos aydei acherim, and there are acherim that can do it. So I would push that more. I'm not saying that people learning Torah have no responsibility to do so. I think that when the responsibility comes, they should. I just don't think, I think that we're attacking a small group of people that are really learning. I'm not talking about the guys that sign up for the mirror and they only show up for 10 minutes of morning seder. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about there are people out there that are learning full days and full nights.
Can you define that for me?
What?
Give me a definition of somebody in yeshiva. What does it mean when you say full day? Because right now you're going, I think you're going the Torah Sumnasa definition. Define it for me.
Okay, you know what? I'll define it. Sure, why not? Okay, someone who a person has every day a certain amount of physical and psychological energies. The vast majority to the physical and psychological energies is devoted to learning Torah and advancing the Torah world. Okay, so I would say in general, that's 8 hours of your day, 12 hours of your day. I'm not sure that we can give an exact number, but it's the majority, vast majority of your energies.
If somebody was only capable of 3 in your definition, you would still consider Torah Sumnasa?
No. Because that's not a normal person, I think. If a person only has the ability, he can only learn 2 hours of the day, that means that he is unable to give the vast majority of his physical and psychological faculties to learning all day. He can't do that. Okay, if you cannot do that, then you're not Torah Somnaso.
So you've taken, instead of Torah Somnaso, which was supposed to be all day, meaning that you're awake and can, to at least the majority. I'm successful 90% of the time.
I would say that there has to be enough time for you to simply eat,
of course,
for you to take an hour or two a day for relaxation, or else you're just going to burn out, right? And maybe do like a normal life while expending the vast majority, other than maintenance hours. Yeah, that other than maintenance hours, you're purely in the base, and you're someone that can use your vast, again, the ruba de ruba of your physical and psychological powers to devote to Torah learning, right? If a person can only learn 2 hours a day, they are not able to tap in to their psychological, physical powers. Then you can't be classified as Torah Somnaso. That's how I would define it.
Now, once you made it subjective to each person, though, so then the system is clearly flawed. Because
why did I make it subjective? Why did I make it subjective?
It's every person's going to need a certain amount of maintenance hours, right? Now, for each person, it's going to be different. It can't be, if we're talking about the vast majority of what they can do, it can't be that I say everybody gets an hour and a half of maintenance hours. What if somebody only needed a half hour and he takes an hour and a half? Then he's not doing what he's supposed to.
That's right. That's wrong.
Right. Okay. So great. So now my point is now practically what's happening in the system isn't that. Why? But let's just take the Bein Hazmanim. Let's just take the Bein Hazmanim as an example.
We just gave an example.
I'm saying you can't tell me that every person needed the same number of vacation days.
Okay. So I think.
But everybody takes off from Yom Kippur until Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. Really, every single one of them still after Sukkot needed another 6 days?
Michael, what you're asking though is kimat impossible. Because you're asking for perfection in a system when everyone's an individual.
I'm saying that I think that's what the Torah is. And if you're not doing that, then this halachic Torah Somnasa doesn't apply to you. And then yes, I think you should do it. Now, do I agree that I think there's a double standard going on in the country? Sure.
No, I'm not. But I'm not even talking about the double standard. I'm just saying, to the degree if someone is able to use the majority of their physical and psychological faculties in order to devote themselves to Torah, that's Torah Somnaso. Now, that person takes 2 hours of relaxation time, and I want to use that example because it's the first one that you gave. And we can talk about Bein Hazmanim in a moment. But and instead of taking the 1 hour and 8 minutes that he really needed, he took 2 hours. That's wrong. But am I going to take him out of Torah Somnaso? I wouldn't, because you're asking perfection for him to know that he needs 1 hour and 8 minutes. I don't think that's right. I think that there are standardized things that have come to pass as Klal Yisroel has aged of people that devote their entire life to learning. And that's why Bein Hazmanim is the way that it is. to shift to that example, so that you have ample amount of time. People do need a relaxation from really, really difficult zmanim and also all the mitzvahs that are going on and preparing for everything. So it's true that one person might need 3 weeks in one day and another person might need 2.5 weeks, but on an individual basis, you should tweak. But to standardize, that's what's fair.
A system needs a standard because it can't function otherwise, but don't pretend then that all these people are using that Torah in the right way. Or not.
I'm not claiming they all are.
Right.
I'm not making that claim.
So then, yes, then I think they should be going.
For those that are not, yeah.
Right. So, where we disagree is that I think that's probably about 90 to 95% of your community, or the community we're talking about, and you think somehow that there's 70% of them are doing the right thing. That's a large gap of a disagreement. You can decide, you don't have to say the percentage, but we're not going to agree on the percentage. And because, again, I think based on this definition, if it has to be individual, everybody has to be honest with themselves. I don't think they are. I don't think they're living up to it.
Okay, I mean, you just admitted that there can be standardized things in a system in order for that to work.
That doesn't mean that the Torah then applies anymore. Meaning when they function as a system, you had to create things. But every individual then, if he needed less time, should have been back already.
Okay.
Or doing that same amount of time at home before he comes back to yeshiva, fine.
But you might not necessarily be able to request that from a 22-year-old who doesn't know that he actually only needed 1 hour and 8 minutes and 32 seconds. So not 1 hour and 8 minutes and 39 seconds is what he took.
A 22-year-old isn't mature enough to do a cheshbon nefesh to figure out like what they're capable of.
Michael, most people know or not.
That's a problem.
It is a problem, but you can't blame someone for that.
I don't think it's unfair to expect people to learn about themselves. And when we want to talk about, by the way, growth or religious growth, of why one of the reasons I think that the army is a tremendous place for religious growth, this is one of the exact points. I think for sure personally, I became significantly more aware of what I'm capable of, what I can do, figuring out limits, both in terms of sleep and functionality, how much I can push myself, awareness of things like that. Obviously not perfect and in no way, but that's something that I learned a lot about. Try to hold myself accountable.
Do you think that majority of the people that go to the army that are religious have that experience?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think you think it's something like 90%, when in reality it's probably like 70%.
I'm not sure it's 90. I do think people do learn how much they can push themselves. It's still a question about whether or not they're able then to do the things they're supposed to. There's another question though of also, and this I think is one of the important points, is we like judging things based on a product coming out, but a major factor of how the product comes out is how did the product come in. And one of the reasons why I'm bothered is that I actually think if the Haredi world believes in their system so much, your product, what you do believe is a very strong religious product. If so, that person would come out radically different than somebody who was like so religiously before he went into the army, especially with some of the systems that are being created for them. They would come, you can't even compare what the result is going to be. And people like to look at the results of people coming from certain communities, and it's not fair because you're not the same person.
What's also not fair is that no matter how much you're going to push a person and their religious convictions, there's an issue of maturity. Saying an 18, 19, 20-year-old person, to the army.
Draft at 22, 23, I don't care.
So I am a far bigger proponent for people so you can ask the Bachram that I tell, the ones that I say don't go to the army, the 9 out of 10. I said, if you learn in yeshiva for 4 or 5 years and you're ironclad and you want to go, it's a mashru acher, right? Because according to my argument, you should never get a job. Right. You can never go out in the secular world. It's impossible, right? Which is ridiculous, obviously. So
why at 26 is it okay for you now to not go to the army and go get a job?
Right.
From that system.
Okay. So that argument I hear a lot more.
And that's a significant percentage of the community, whether it was 26 or 27, 28, at whatever point
this may be so, but that's not the main argument. And the main argument is let's pull out the 20-year-olds. Let's pull out the 19-year-olds.
I don't care about the government's argument so much. I'm not saying I agree with the process of how the government wants to do it or that.
So what's your take?
Again, they want to learn for 4, 5, 6 years, whatever. That's fine, amazing, totally for that. And create the systems like Chashmonaim where you have a tremendous say, and those are the only people that are allowed there. You believe in that, like we shouldn't be exposed to anybody else. That's fine. Also, create it that way. I think the army has a lot of work to do in order to help create those systems still. And part of the problem is that it's hard to create entire ecosystems when you're working with 70 people. Like, that's a challenge. But I still think, anyways, like if it's something that if you're real about it on there.
Do you know what this is?
Yeah.
It's the world's smallest violin.
It's not an excuse. You can do it anyways. Now,
look, there should be a much bigger push. There should be a much bigger push. For sure. Instead of grabbing people, create the environment first, and then grab people.
Agreed.
If you need to.
But the other side is saying, I don't care if you create the environment, we're not going anyways. So that's a problem. And when the environment does exist now, and there's examples, and you have 60 people come, but I'm not sure what their problems are exactly, like with Chashmonim. Like, I'm not a mikvah guy, but like they built a mikvah there so like they could go to the mikvah. Like that's like we're talking above and beyond. Like they probably could have been like
I would have traded that for like 3 hours in the afternoon to learn.
And they have that. Is it in the afternoon? Maybe it's part in the morning, part at night. Fine.
No, I think 3 hours is not. But you know what I'm saying? Like I would have made that trade.
But
would you recommend 19-year-olds to go to the army that want to go to the army?
I think person should be learning, for sure, a decent amount of time before. I think it changes in a lot.
A boy comes here to learn Eretz Yisrael, and he went to a left-wing Masifta or modern Orthodox, right? And he's come here. He's learned his year at insert generic yeshiva here. Okay, he wants to go to the army. Would you recommend him to do that?
It depends on the kid. In terms of again, part of there's a few parts. One, what are his options? What's he open to? For example, kids all the time say, "Yes, what should I do over the summer?" Right? You might not like either of his options, but those are the only two things he's considering.
Let me change the question. Let me change the question. I see.
That's one. That's just like that's one part of it. What and comparing this option to other options that he would, and then within the army also. Let's say if he's willing to consider the army, like what frameworks is he willing to consider? I don't think somebody shouldn't go in a religious framework. I don't think they should. I think that's a bad idea. I don't think somebody should go to a secular college.
Michael, we're over time. I just want to ask one. I'm just going to change the question a little bit, and I'll allow one question from the audience, and you'll get to pick. Okay, but we're just over time. Let me change the question to: you have a 19, 20-year-old boy. He went to Yeshiva X. Michael, Rabbi Goldman. Okay, I want to go to the army, but I could learn 1 year in slightly more intense yeshiva Y. What should I do?
What can he do after that year?
Whatever I want.
Learn in yeshiva and then go after.
Okay.
I want him to learn Torah before he goes. I want him to build himself up religiously as much as he can before he goes. All for that.
Yeah, total agreement there. Okay.
We're on the same team of that. I want the same results. Now again, I think they're different. I think as a whole, people need to appreciate different levels and areas of religious growth that exist there.
Of course.
Somebody who learns when it's challenging, also his connection to his talmid Torah is very different than somebody who learns in yeshiva and it's never been hard.
For sure.
We see that and that manifests itself. Even people working, Baal Batim have that. All of a sudden, that Baal Bas who has to wake up early and learn, like he's so much more connected to talmid Torah than like.
It's wild. They'll learn for 2 hours and they'll retain so much more information than people learning 8 hours in a chanami. 100%.
And that happens a lot. And I think you see lots of people building that while they're also, and that exists. Can you quantify his connection to talmid Torah? No, there's no number. It wasn't like, look at him, he's a 78 now and he used to be 42.
Right.
So people struggle with that because it's not something I could check.
Right.
But that exists and that's real in a lot of different areas. Separate from the fact that there's no question in terms of if you value this of avodas Hashem, this area of avodas Hashem, of caring about Klal Yisroel, they are leaps and bounds ahead in that area of caring about the Jewish people more than other people. So they've had to do so much more. If we value that as an area of avodas Hashem to work on, which we do, it's the mitzvah, Havta l'recha kamocha, and many other manifestations of that. Mm-hmm. So then, they've grown tremendously and invested tremendously in that mitzvah. What are the mitzvah point number for that? I don't know. We'll find out in Shammai. I'm
just in shock we agreed on something.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear that answer. Very, very chashuv. Okay, we'll take one question. You choose. If there's only one hand up, so then that makes it easy, right?
You said yourself that eventually people in the army reach a point where you need something. And so my first question is, what is the difference between someone who's done their part in the army and they physically or emotionally or mentally just can't go anymore, versus that person who is learning as much as physically possible and mentally possible and they just simply can't learn anymore? That's my first question. My second question is, which is connected to that, is at what point have you fulfilled your chiyuv of joining the army? Could you never go to work? Do you now have to go to the army for the rest of your life? Because for the many people that have spoken about this, they go to the army and it feels like they kind of just do it once and they fulfilled their chiyuv and then they walk away from it. And then I ask them and say, well, why aren't you fighting to go back? And they go, well, I did my part. Well, if it's a chiyuv, you should be doing it the whole time. And my third thing is, if you're telling someone that... No, it's all connected. If you're going to tell someone that they have to do something, or they're mechuyev to do something, you have to bring the raya, versus the person who's saying, Lav davka, Allah lahavi raya, right? I am yet to hear a raya a significant, meaningful raya that a person is mechuyev to go to the army if they have the capability to do so, versus the people that are saying, Lav Dafka. I know that I'm contributing to Klal Yisroel, especially if you know that you have a lot more skills in learning than you might have holding a gun, or you could do more for Klal Yisroel, right? So at what point do you trust your intuition? And
so, Michael, you can answer one of those. Why don't you answer the last one? It was hardest.
Last one was
Allah Viraya.
that I think you should give a shir about. Maybe you should have somebody else come. There should be a real shir. One of the things that's bothered me actually, I think, is that on both sides there's been oftentimes a lot of talking without like going through Makoros. I think it'll come out very clear if you go through Makoros. Oftentimes it should be done with two people somebody representing each side in the Makoros, and oftentimes the problem is that
only one side really needs to
one of the sides isn't willing to engage of having somebody else go through the Makoros with them.
That's immature. But one person has to bring a raya. One person doesn't have to.
The rayas are there. I mean, it's like it could be a real shir on a halachic sense without question, like that.
Like you're defending a position that you actually have to bring a raya. We don't have to bring a raya. I mean, the people that say that.
Until you'll see like the very easy, obvious sources that require you to do it, and then you would have to bring a raya not to go. So I'm saying the shir would change al mila havi raya very, very obviously, very clearly. I've no suffix about that.
So
yeah,
he's arguing from authority.
Okay, so can you answer the first question?
I'm just saying, there's not time now. We're not going to have a shir now.
It
should happen.
I'm not expecting.
But
at what point do you feel like personally you fulfilled your chiyuv?
That's a great question.
And what is the difference between doing your max in the army and then not returning versus doing your max in learning and you just can't learn another hour?
Yeah. So that if you came to me and said like I was learning till I fell asleep. Like I don't have like a tie on that person. Like I was learning davening mamish till I thought I was collapsing. Like
how do you quantify the people that don't go back to the army versus the people who like?
Yeah, that part is bothering me actually, and I've called out like certain friends even or people I was close with about that. If you had the ability to do something and didn't, I think they were wrong. I told them that. I don't mind telling somebody again like in the right context and in the right way. Try to, but like. I think there are people that made the wrong decision that should have gone back and didn't. I don't know
shouldn't it be
what
everyone?
What?
Should it not be everyone if they are able to?
Should it not?
If you're mechuyev to do it once, you should be mechuyev to do it again. Like why would it change? If anything,
yeah,
it should be more.
Somebody who went, yes, 100%. I'm saying those are the people that I'm sad at those people. I'm sad at those people who went and they did their service, and now like every Miluim group was looking for more people, and like they've chosen not to go. It was a choice.
So you think it's a lifelong commitment?
What?
According to you, it's a lifelong commitment.
Again, the army helps in every group. You have people who are professional at trying to help define also until what point and stage, is it good for us to have those people? Are they helpful? So the army right now is decided age 40. Who made the decision? I don't know. It kind of makes sense to me, and you can see at a certain point also, in different things, and there will be different factors of each person. Again, like certain things are subjective of I think you're watching this even in Sadir and the active duty of the number of soldiers that they've literally been fighting in war for 2 years straight, and they're they act like they can't anymore. But again, different people are different. Some of those people hit their wall at 5 months, others at a year and 2 months, and that's going to be different, and that depends on the person, their nature, the family, requirements, and there's lots of things that'll go into it. But
we got to wrap up. Michael, thank you so much for coming. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Always.
We really hope that you're able to grow and enjoy with this amazing content that we just put together. Do us a favor. Don't just make it about you and me. Share this with the world. Get that Torah out there for everyone to see. Additionally, if you want to hear more, which we hope you do, you can subscribe to our content so that you can be up to date with all of the new amazing Torah that we have here in the yeshiva, pumping it out to you as the Klal.